Another day and yet another new name on the list of 2023 driver candidates. You have to admit, the F1 driver market is a pretty unusual place. You'll see a bunch more drivers, way more than you should, floating around than actual seats. And for some reason, no team is going to commit to any of them before taking an excruciating amount of time to decide. With that said, here's a new name for the Alpine seat. First off, Pierre Gasly is still at the top of the list. Now, right before the Singapore Grand Prix, there will be at least 4 drivers running in a private test with Alpine, as the team takes all the time in the world to decide which one they want. And as you guessed it, Gasly's still at the top. At the same time, if you were hoping AlphaTauri was gonna release him without an alternative, it's not looking so good. In fact, Lewis Hamilton jumped in, saying he's starting to doubt whether Mercedes will be able to win a race this year with hardly 6 rounds remaining. And while his car's been super competitive at a handful of events this year, Red Bull Racing is still making massive strides forward. So, the Briton seems to think that it's still pretty debatable whether it can be caught. And while we're at it, former Alfa Romeo driver Antonio Giovinazzi has also joined the list of candidates for Fernando Alonso's Alpine seat. That does not stand alone as a glorious vacancy, but that's only if the French team is unable to snatch Pierre Gasly from AlphaTauri. Yeah, they really seem to want that guy on the team. Up next, is Red Bull giving up on Colton Herta anytime soon? Now, it's not a big surprise that Giovinazzi lost his Alfa Romeo seat to Zhou Guanyu this year. At the same time, it seems to have retained Ferrari's backing as one of the team's official reserve drivers. In fact, a part of that actually involved undertaking free practice sessions with Haas. Rumor has it that the 28-year-old will now join Jack Doohan, Colton Herta, and Nick de Vries at a private test organized by the team in Budapest as they try to figure out their options for 2023. Now, Herta's attendance is really just a part of a mutually beneficial deal with AlphaTauri. That way, they can release Gasly to Alpine only if they can sign the young American prospect. And for that, they're gonna need a super license exemption directly from the FIA. And well, Red Bull hasn't really given up on securing Herta's services either, which is exactly why the Californian is taking part in the Alpine program, instead of the private test organized by McLaren this week. Yep, that's exactly where 2021 IndyCar champion Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward would have been in action. What's more, Herta seems to be in the running for McLaren's 2 FP1 sessions. Alright, so McLaren has already said that it would be willing to end its relationship with Herta if it meant him getting a full-time F1 seat. In fact, the team is pretty well subscribed with IndyCar talent. You've got Palou free to continue testing with the team right after he settled a legal dispute with his Chip Ganassi racing team over some attempt to defect to McLaren's IndyCar team for 2023. Now the Spaniard is gonna stick to CGR next year, but whenever he's not racing, he's free to go after his Formula One dream. Moving on to this week's test in Barcelona. They were his very first experience in Formula One machinery, and that's gotta be special, right? Now, if McLaren isn't really able to extract Oscar Piastri from his Alpine reserve contract before next season, then Palou, Herta, and O'Ward are all in the running for McLaren's 2 mandatory rookie FP1 sessions. Following up, Hamilton has his doubts about his victory streak. The 7-time world champion has won at least 1 race in every season of his professional racing career, but with just 6 more races to go this year, fans are starting to doubt if he'd be able to continue his victory streak, and frankly, so is he. Right now, Mercedes is facing its worst campaign since winning its first title back in 2014, and it's now on track for its first ever winless season since 2011. So yeah, this is gonna suck for Hamilton and his team. Now the W13 has generally become a much stronger car in the second half of the season, to trail Ferrari by just 35 points in the battle for second in the constructors' standings. And then we've got George Russell, who is equal with Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc on 7 podiums apiece. But that was right until Ferrari couldn't keep up with the runaway Red Bull Racing anymore. And while we're talking about them, let's just say Red Bull had a pretty great season enjoying a 5-race victory streak, all thanks to their star driver, Max Verstappen. And speaking after a strong recovery from 19th all the way to 5th in Monza, Hamilton says the scale of Red Bull Racing's dominance may have closed the door, because we've got Mercedes converting its improved form into victory right before the end of the season. Coming up, Hamilton calls Red Bull unbeatable, performance-wise. In fact, he calls it realistic, and who could blame him? After all the races this weekend, we're not surprised when Hamilton says it's gonna gonna take some real doing to beat that car. Clearly, performance-wise, they're always gonna be fully ahead of everyone. Adding to that, the 7-time world champion says that his team doesn't have the upgrades they need to overtake Red Bull, so it's gonna take nothing less than a miracle. Although, it's not really impossible because they could have beaten Verstappen in Budapest. But again, the F1 driver is super chill at the front, so you never really know their true pace. At the same time, team boss Toto Wolff jumped in, saying he was more optimistic, noting that the team was still pretty close to sniping for victory at the Dutch Grand Prix, and that's right before a virtual safety car undermined its ambitious strategy. For him, victory is the target because they don't want to face a winless season, even if the sails are absolutely set for 2023. In fact, at this point, it would be a pretty nice thing in a difficult season for the team. Adding to that, Wolff said that the slow-speed Singapore circuit would be a much better match for the W13. Meanwhile, it's probably gonna turn out to be a weaker track for Red Bull Racing, so it seems like the odds are in their favor. Not to mention, Wolff has been heaping praise on De Vries. With all the ambiguity around seats for the F1 drivers in the 2023 season, everyone's got their eyes on influential people to see if they can spot a potential replacement. And well, Wolff seems to be praising the Mercedes Formula E world champion and F1 reserve driver Nick De Vries quite a lot. And after his successful debut at the Italian Grand Prix, it would be unfair to say he didn't deserve it. Having said that, right after some Friday practice running for Aston Martin, De Vries received a Williams call-up on Saturday morning, although we might add it was after an unfortunate incident with Alex Albon, who was rushed to the hospital for an appendectomy. Moving on, the Dutch driver qualified 13th, which soon became 8th on the grid after being penalized, and finished 9th to score points on debut. Needless to say, it immediately put him at the center of the driver market, and Williams was pretty keen to offer him Nicholas Latifi's seat, while Alpine also seems to be considering him as a potential candidate. As for Wolff, he wasn't surprised the 27-year-old had done such a solid job. In fact, he added he's not only fast and has shown that in the junior categories, but he's also intelligent and a good team player. Finally, Nick De Vries has become the center of attention. Wolff was pretty impressed by the young man's performance, saying he deserved it and probably did a better job than anyone else in his place would have possibly done. Think about it. You're in an Aston Martin and you're driving around with the rake, and suddenly you're being drafted at the last minute in an entirely different car. You're literally beating your teammate by quite a margin, so you start 8th and you finish 9th. For Wolff, Niki Lauda would have literally taken his hat off as a driver, and we gotta agree with the Mercedes team boss. Nick definitely deserves to have a place in Formula 1, and despite him winning Mercedes a world championship in Formula E, he doesn't really have any formal management links to the team beyond being a reserve driver, at least for now. In fact, the Dutchman even revealed in Italy that he's been managing himself as he's trying to land a seat for 2023. Having said that, there's already a lot of competition in F1, and Nick seems to be making his way as a potential F1 driver in 2023. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on the candidates for the Alpine seat? Who do you think deserves it? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.